Every pet owner's worst nightmare is watching their beloved companion suffer in silence. Duke, a once playful golden retriever, had been limping for 3 painful years while his desperate family searched for answers. Dr. Lena Carter thought. She'd seen everything in her 30 years as a veterinarian. When she opened up Duke's leg that morning, she found something that changed everything. Living parasites were feeding inside the dog's flesh. These weren't normal parasites from her textbooks. They were bigger and seemed deliberately placed. There, as Duke's family waited for news, Dr. Carter started noticing a pattern. 3 other dogs with the same symptoms had disappeared from the local animal shelter. The parasites looked too organized, too perfect in their placement. Something wasn't right about how they got there. What if someone had put them there on purpose? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Asterisk. Dr. Lena Carter had built her reputation on certainty. In 30 years of veterinary practice, she developed an almost mystical ability to diagnose ailments that stumped younger colleagues. Her patients' owners trusted her completely, and her weathered hands had guided countless animals back to health. The framed veterinary license on her office wall, issued in 1994, represented more than credentials. It symbolized decades of unwavering dedication to healing. The morning light filtered through the windows of Riverside Animal Clinic, casting familiar shadows across examination tables that had seen thousands of procedures. Dr. Carter moved with practiced efficiency, her silver hair pulled back in the same simple bun she'd worn for 20 years. At 62, she possessed the calm confidence that comes only from experience. Yet today, something felt different. "Doctor, the Hendersons are here with Duke," Sarah called from the reception desk. Sarah Mitchell had worked as the clinic's receptionist for 15 years, her warm voice becoming as much a part of the clinic's identity as Dr. Carter herself. She understood the rhythm of this place, knew which cases required extra time and which families needed gentle handling. Dr. Carter nodded, reviewing Duke's file one final time. The golden retriever had been a patient since puppyhood, when the Henderson family first brought him in for vaccinations. She remembered Tom Henderson's pride when he'd carried the tiny puppy through these same doors, his daughter Emma giggling. As Duke licked her face, that was 8 years ago. Emma was now 16, and Duke had grown into a magnificent 100-pound companion who'd been part of every family vacation, birthday party, and quiet evening at home. The limp had started 3 years ago. Subtle at first, just a slight favoring of the left hind leg that Tom noticed during their morning walks. They'd tried rest, anti-inflammatories, even expensive physical therapy sessions. Dr. Carter had examined Duke multiple times, run x-rays, blood tests, even consulted with specialists at the veterinary teaching hospital. Everything came back normal. "The Hendersons are good people," Marcus Thompson observed, preparing the examination room. Marcus had joined the clinic 5 years ago as a veterinary assistant, bringing youthful energy balanced by genuine compassion for animals. At 28, he possessed an intuitive understanding of animal behavior that impressed even Dr. Carter. Duke means everything to that family. Dr. Carter knew Marcus was right. She'd watched the Hendersons' dedication to Duke's care, their willingness to try any treatment, travel any distance for a specialist's opinion. They'd spent thousands of dollars seeking answers, never complaining about the cost. Their love for Duke transcended the typical pet-owner relationship. He was family. The examination room door opened, and Tom Henderson entered with his wife, Linda, and daughter Emma. Duke limped beside them, his golden coat still lustrous despite his obvious discomfort. The family's faces bore the weariness of long worry, the particular exhaustion that comes from watching a loved one suffer without understanding why. "Dr. Carter, thank you for working us in," Tom said. his voice carrying the weight of countless sleepless nights. He was a contractor by trade, a practical man more comfortable with problems that had clear solutions. Duke's mysterious condition had challenged everything he understood about fixing things. Linda Henderson's eyes showed the strain of 3 years of hoping. She'd researched every possible diagnosis, joined online forums for pet owners facing similar mysteries, sought second and third opinions. A high school teacher accustomed to finding answers in books, she'd been defeated by Duke's inexplicable suffering. Emma knelt beside Duke, her teenage concerns forgotten in the presence of her beloved companion's pain. "He's been worse this week, Dr. Carter. Sometimes he won't even get up to eat." Her voice cracked with the particular heartbreak of watching a childhood friend grow old and sick. Dr. Carter approached Duke slowly, allowing him to recognize her scent and touch. Despite his discomfort, his tail attempted a weak wag, a testament to the golden retriever's enduring gentleness. She ran her experienced hands along his frame, feeling for changes since his last examination. The muscle atrophy in his left hind leg had progressed. What had once been subtle wasting was now pronounced, the leg noticeably smaller than its healthy counterpart. Duke's weight had dropped 15 pounds over the past year, his appetite diminishing as chronic pain wore down his spirit. "I want to do something different today," Dr. Carter announced, her voice steady despite growing unease. "I'm going to perform an exploratory procedure. We need to look inside the affected area and see what we're dealing with." The Hendersons exchanged glances. They discussed this possibility during the drive to the clinic, knowing that conventional approaches had failed. Tom nodded slowly. "If you think it might help Duke, we trust your judgment." Marcus prepared the surgical suite while Dr. Carter explained the procedure. She would make a careful incision along Duke's thigh, examining the muscle tissue and surrounding structures for anything abnormal. It was an invasive approach, but after 3 years of mystery, they needed answers. The surgery began routinely. Duke lay peacefully under anesthesia, his breathing steady and vital signs stable. Dr. Carter made the initial incision with practiced precision, expecting to find scar tissue, perhaps a foreign object, or signs of an autoimmune condition affecting the muscle. Instead, she found something that made her step back from the table. Writhing beneath, the muscle tissue was a colony of larvae, unlike anything in her veterinary education. They were larger than typical. Parasites, organized in a way that seemed almost systematic. The creatures had created a complex network within Duke's leg, feeding off the tissue while somehow avoiding vital structures. "Marcus, come look at this," Dr. Carter called, her voice carefully controlled. She'd learned long ago not to alarm her staff unnecessarily, but these findings demanded a second opinion. Marcus approached the surgical table and immediately understood why Dr. Carter had called him over. The larvae were moving with purpose, their behavior suggesting intelligence beyond typical parasitic activity. They seemed to respond to the surgical light, shifting away from the illumination in coordinated movements. "Doctor, I've never seen anything like this," Marcus whispered. "How could they have gotten there? And why haven't they killed him?" Dr. Carter carefully extracted several specimens, placing them in sterile containers for further examination. The larvae were approximately 2 inches long, with segmented bodies and what appeared to be specialized feeding apparatus. Their coloration was unusual, a dark reddish-brown that suggested they were well established in their host. "These aren't in any textbook I've studied," Dr. Carter said, continuing her examination of Duke's leg. "Look at this tissue damage pattern. It's too organized, too precise for natural parasitic activity." The discovery raised more questions than answers. How had dozens of these creatures established themselves in Duke's leg without causing life-threatening infection? Why had blood tests failed to detect their presence? Most disturbing of all, why did their placement and behavior suggest deliberate introduction rather than natural infestation? Dr. Carter completed the surgery, carefully cleaning the affected area and removing as many larvae as she could identify. Duke's vital signs remained stable throughout the procedure, his body showing remarkable resilience despite the shocking discovery. As Duke recovered from anesthesia, Dr. Carter faced the difficult task of explaining the findings to his family. The Hendersons waited in the consultation room, their faces showing the particular tension of people preparing for either very good or very bad news. "We found the source of Duke's problem," Dr. Carter began, choosing her words carefully. "There were parasitic organisms in his leg, quite a few of them. I've removed what I could identify, but we need to run extensive tests to understand exactly what we're dealing with." Linda Henderson's face went pale. "Parasites? How is that possible? Duke hasn't traveled anywhere exotic. He barely leaves our neighborhood." Tom leaned forward in his chair. "Are they dangerous? Could they spread to other animals? To us?" Dr. Carter had been asking herself the same questions. "I don't believe they pose a threat to humans, and I've seen no evidence of transmission between animals. But I'll be honest with you, these organisms are unlike anything I've encountered in my career." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Is Duke going to be okay? Will the surgery help him?" "I believe removing the parasites will significantly improve Duke's comfort and mobility," Dr. Carter replied. "But we need to understand how this happened. I'm going to consult with specialists and run comprehensive tests on the specimens." As the Henderson family left with Duke, who was already showing signs of improvement, Dr. Carter returned to her office to examine the extracted larvae under her microscope. The closer she looked, the more convinced she became that these creatures were not naturally occurring parasites. Their structure was too complex, their behavior too organized. Someone with advanced knowledge of parasitology had created these organisms, but for what purpose? And why had Duke been chosen as their host? Sarah knocked on the office door. "Doctor, there's something you should know. I was reviewing our recent cases, and I found references to 3 other dogs with similar symptoms. All of them came from the Millbrook Animal Shelter." Dr. Carter looked up from her microscope, a cold realization settling over her. "What happened to those dogs, Sarah?" "That's just it, Doctor. According to the shelter records, all 3 dogs were adopted, but I can't find any follow-up information. No new owner contact details, no vaccination records transfers. It's like they simply disappeared." The pieces of a disturbing puzzle were beginning to form in Dr. Carter's mind. Duke's case might not be isolated. If other dogs had suffered similar infestations, and if those dogs had subsequently vanished, then someone was conducting illegal experimentation on innocent animals. She thought about Duke's improvement already, evident just hours after surgery. The parasites had been causing his suffering, but they'd also been carefully managing that suffering, keeping him alive while using his body as a host. The precision required for such manipulation suggested expertise far beyond typical veterinary knowledge. Dr. Carter made a decision that would change the course of her quiet life. Tomorrow, she would visit the Millbrook Animal Shelter and ask them very direct questions about their recent adoptions and animal health records. Marcus appeared in the doorway. "Doctor, I've been thinking about those specimens. The way they were organized in Duke's leg. It reminded me of something I saw in a research journal about bioengineering. Do you think someone could have deliberately introduced them?" Dr. Carter met his eyes, seeing her own suspicions reflected there. "I think we need to find out exactly what's been happening at that animal shelter, Marcus. And I have a feeling we're not going to like what we discover." The morning after Duke's surgery, Dr. Carter arrived at the clinic before dawn, her mind churning with questions that had kept her awake most of the night. The preserved larvae specimens sat in her laboratory refrigerator like silent accusations, their very existence challenging everything she understood about veterinary medicine. Under the powerful lens of her research microscope, The creatures revealed details that made her stomach turn. Each larva possessed specialized feeding apparatus that seemed designed for maximum efficiency while minimizing host damage. Their segmented bodies showed evidence of genetic modification structures that didn't exist in nature, adaptations that could only have been engineered. Dr. Carter documented her findings meticulously, photographing the specimens from multiple angles and recording detailed measurements. The largest larva measured nearly 3 inches in length, its body displaying a complex nervous system far more sophisticated than typical parasites. Most disturbing of all, the creature showed signs of coordinated behavior even in death. There, positions suggesting they had been working together as a colony. Her hands trembled slightly as she prepared tissue samples for analysis. In 30 years of practice, she'd encountered every common parasite that affected domestic animals, and many uncommon ones. These specimens belonged to no classification she could identify. They were artificial, created by someone with advanced knowledge of parasitology and bioengineering. The phone rang, interrupting her concentration. "Dr. Carter, it's Dr. James Morrison at the State Veterinary Laboratory," the voice said. "I got your message about unusual parasitic specimens. Can you tell me more about what you found?" Dr. Morrison had been her mentor during veterinary school, a man whose expertise in parasitology was nationally recognized. If anyone could help identify these creatures, it would be him. "James, I need you to see these specimens immediately," Dr. Carter said. "I found them in a golden retriever's leg muscle, dozens of them, organized in a way that suggests deliberate placement. They don't match any known parasitic species." There was a long pause. "Lena, are you certain about what you're describing?" "Parasites don't organize themselves in host tissue. They follow biological imperatives for feeding and reproduction. That's exactly why I need your opinion. These specimens suggest someone has been experimenting with parasitic organisms, possibly using domestic animals as test subjects." Dr. Morrison's voice grew serious. "Send me everything you have: specimens, photographs, tissue samples. And Lena, be very careful about who else you discuss this with. If you're right about artificial parasites, we're dealing with illegal research that could have serious implications." After ending the call, Dr. Carter turned her attention to the Henderson family's concerns. Tom had called twice asking about Duke's progress, his voice carrying the particular anxiety of someone who'd watched a loved one suffer for years. She was pleased to report that Duke had shown remarkable improvement overnight. His appetite had returned, and he was putting weight on the affected leg for the first time in months. But Duke's recovery only deepened the mystery. If removing the parasites could produce such immediate improvement, why had they been placed there to begin with? What was the purpose of causing deliberate, controlled suffering? Marcus arrived early, eager to continue examining the specimens. His background in veterinary research made him particularly valuable in analyzing the creature's unusual characteristics. "Doctor, I've been researching parasitic bioengineering," Marcus said, setting down several scientific journals. "There are papers describing experimental modification of parasites for medical research. Some scientists believe controlled parasitic infections could be used to study pain management and tissue repair." Dr. Carter looked up from her microscope. "You're suggesting someone was using Duke as a research subject without his owner's knowledge or consent. It would explain the precision of the infestation and the careful balance between causing harm and maintaining host viability," Marcus replied. "But who would have the expertise and resources for this kind of research? And how did they gain access to Duke?" The answer to Marcus's question came sooner than expected. Sarah knocked on the laboratory door, her face showing unusual concern. "Doctor, I've been reviewing our patient records from the past year," Sarah said. "I found something disturbing. Duke was brought in for a routine vaccination 6 months ago, but there's no record of which vaccines were administered. The injection log shows his name, but the vaccine type column is blank. Dr. Carter felt a chill run down her spine. That's impossible. We never administer injections without proper documentation. It's required by law. That's what I thought, Sarah continued. But I checked with our vaccine supplier, and they have no record of shipping vaccines to us that week. It's like someone used our clinic to inject Duke with something else entirely. The implications were staggering. Someone had used Dr. Carter's own clinic to implant the parasites in Duke, taking advantage of a routine appointment to conduct illegal experimentation. The betrayal felt personal. Her clinic had been violated, her trust exploited to harm an innocent animal. Marcus pulled up the appointment schedule from 6 months ago. Doctor, look at this. Duke's appointment was scheduled by phone, but the caller wasn't Mrs. Henderson. The name in our system shows R. Walsh, someone from the Millbrook Animal Shelter. Dr. Carter's suspicions crystallized into certainty. The animal shelter wasn't just connected to other missing dogs with similar symptoms. They had directly facilitated Duke's infection. Someone at the shelter had arranged for Duke to be brought to her clinic under false pretenses, then used the appointment to introduce the parasites into his leg. We need to contact the Hendersons immediately, Dr. Carter decided. They deserve to know that Duke was deliberately infected, and we need to find out exactly what happened during that appointment. The call to Tom Henderson was one of the most difficult conversations of Dr. Carter's career. Explaining that his beloved companion had been used as an unwilling test subject, that trusted institutions had conspired to cause Duke suffering, required delicate handling of a family's growing outrage. You're telling me someone at the animal shelter arranged to have parasites injected into Duke? Tom's voice carried a mixture of disbelief and fury. Why would they do such a thing? What did Duke ever do to deserve this? Linda Henderson's response was more direct. We're calling the police immediately. This is animal abuse on a criminal level. Someone needs to be held accountable. Emma's reaction broke Dr. Carter's heart. The teenager's voice cracked with emotion as she processed the deliberate nature of Duke's suffering. All this time, we thought we were bad owners because we couldn't help him. But someone was hurting him on purpose. Dr. Carter tried to provide reassurance while acknowledging the family's pain. Duke is going to recover completely. The parasites have been removed, and he's already showing significant improvement. What we need to focus on now is making sure this doesn't happen to other animals. After ending the call with the Hendersons, Dr. Carter made a decision that would put her directly in conflict with forces she didn't yet understand. She was going to visit the Millbrook Animal Shelter and demand answers about their role in Duke's infection. Marcus volunteered to accompany her, sensing that the investigation was entering dangerous territory. Doctor, if they're willing to use animals for illegal experimentation, they're not going to be happy about being discovered. We should be prepared for resistance. Dr. Carter looked at the parasitic specimens one final time before securing them in the clinic's safe. These creatures represented evidence of a conspiracy that had used our clinic, violated her patients, and caused unnecessary suffering to animals and families throughout the community. As they prepared to leave for the animal shelter, Dr. Carter reflected on how quickly her quiet life had been disrupted. Yesterday, she had been a respected veterinarian dealing with a challenging medical case. Today, she was an investigator pursuing people who had deliberately tortured innocent animals for unknown purposes. The preserved specimens in her safe were more than medical curiosities. They were proof that someone with advanced scientific knowledge and substantial resources was conducting illegal experiments on domestic animals. The question that haunted her was simple. If they were willing to do this to Duke, how many other animals had suffered similar fates? Marcus started the car, and they drove toward the Millbrook Animal Shelter in grim silence. Dr. Carter knew they were about to confront people who had shown callous disregard for animal welfare, but she also knew they had to act. Duke's recovery proved that the parasites could be removed, that other animals could be saved if they could identify and stop the source of the infection. The morning sun cast long shadows as they approached the animal shelter, its cheerful exterior masking the dark activities that Dr. Carter now suspected were taking place inside. She carried copies of Duke's medical records and photographs of the extracted specimens, evidence that would either lead to justice or put her in direct conflict with people who had already proven their willingness to cause deliberate harm. The Millbrook Animal Shelter occupied a modern facility on the outskirts of town, its welcoming facade designed to suggest safety and compassion for abandoned animals. Dr. Carter had visited many times over the years, consulting on difficult medical cases and providing emergency treatment for injured strays. Today, the familiar building felt different, potentially hostile. Marcus parked near the main entrance, and they approached the reception area with purposeful determination. The morning volunteer shift was just beginning, and the sounds of barking dogs and meowing cats created a backdrop of apparent normalcy that Dr. Carter now viewed with suspicion. Dr. Carter. What a pleasant surprise, called Rebecca Walsh, the shelter director, emerging from her office with a smile that seemed forced. Rebecca was a woman in her early 50s, professionally dressed and impeccably organized. She had managed the shelter for 7 years, earning a reputation for efficiency and dedication to animal welfare. Rebecca, I need to discuss some concerning information about animals that have been housed here, Dr. Carter said, her tone professional but serious. Specifically, I need to review records for 3 dogs that developed mysterious limping conditions before being adopted. Rebecca's smile faltered slightly. Of course, doctor. Though I'm not sure what you mean by mysterious conditions. We maintain detailed health records for all our animals, and any medical issues are fully disclosed to adoptive families. Marcus stepped forward, carrying a folder containing Duke's medical records and photographs of the extracted parasites. We're investigating a case involving deliberate parasitic infection of a domestic animal. The infection appears to have been introduced during a routine veterinary appointment that was arranged by someone from this shelter. The change in Rebecca's demeanor was immediate and telling. Her professional composure gave way to nervous defensiveness, her eyes darting between Dr. Carter and Marcus as if calculating how much they knew. I'm afraid I don't understand what you're suggesting, Rebecca said, backing toward her office. This shelter operates under strict protocols. We would never be involved in anything that could harm animals in our care. Dr. Carter opened the folder and displayed photographs of the parasitic specimens. These were extracted from a golden retriever named Duke Henderson. The parasites show clear evidence of genetic modification and artificial introduction. Duke's appointment at my clinic was arranged by someone using your shelter's name. Rebecca stared at the photographs, her face growing pale. The images clearly disturbed her, but her reaction suggested recognition rather than surprise. She knew exactly what she was looking at. I need to see your intake records for the past year, Dr. Carter continued. Specifically, dogs that arrived healthy but developed limping conditions during their stay here. I also need documentation of any research partnerships or special programs involving animal health studies. Dr. Carter, I appreciate your concern, but I can't simply turn over confidential shelter records without proper authorization. Rebecca replied, her voice gaining strength as she retreated behind administrative procedures. If you have specific allegations, they should be directed to our board of directors or animal control authorities. Marcus pulled out a printed list of the 3 missing dogs that Sarah had identified. Boxer, German Shepherd, and Golden Retriever mix all developed mysterious leg problems while housed here, all subsequently adopted with no follow-up records. Where are these animals now? Rebecca glanced at the list and immediately turned toward her office. I need to check our computer system for those specific cases. If you'll wait here, I'll see what information I can provide. As Rebecca disappeared into her office, Dr. Carter and Marcus exchanged concerned looks. The shelter director's reaction confirmed their suspicions. She knew more about the parasitic infections than she was admitting. "Doctor, look at this," Marcus whispered, pointing to a bulletin board near the reception desk. Among the usual adoption announcements and volunteer schedules was a notice about a special research partnership between the shelter and something called Advanced Biological Solutions. Dr. Carter photographed the notice with her phone, noting the contact information and brief description of collaborative animal health studies designed to improve treatment protocols for shelter animals. The language was deliberately vague, but it provided the first concrete evidence of outside research involvement at the shelter. A young volunteer named Jenny approached them, carrying a clipboard of morning medication schedules. "Are you here?" "About the dogs in the quarantine section?" she asked innocently. "Rebecca told us not to discuss them with visitors, but they've been acting really strange lately." Before Dr. Carter could respond, Rebecca reappeared from her office, her face flushed and her manner agitated. "Jenny, please return to your duties." "Dr. Carter, I'm afraid the computer system is experiencing technical difficulties. Perhaps you could return another time with proper documentation." "What quarantine section?" Dr. Carter asked Jenny, ignoring Rebecca's obvious attempt to end the conversation. "Are there animals here with medical conditions that require isolation?" Jenny looked nervously between Dr. Carter and Rebecca. "There are 6 dogs in the back building that came in healthy but started limping after a few weeks. They're scheduled for special adoptions, but we're not supposed to—" "Jenny, that's enough," Rebecca interrupted sharply. "Dr. Carter, I'm going to have to ask you to leave unless you have official business with the shelter." Dr. Carter recognized the signs of a cover-up in progress. Rebecca's defensiveness, the convenient computer problems, and the reference to dogs with mysterious limping conditions painted a clear picture of ongoing experimentation. "I'll be back with proper authorization," Dr. Carter said firmly. "And I'll be bringing people who have the authority to examine every animal in this facility." As they walked toward the parking lot, Marcus pointed to a security camera system that seemed unusually sophisticated for an animal shelter. "Doctor, look at those cameras. That's military-grade surveillance equipment. Why would a shelter need that level of security?" Dr. Carter studied the camera placement, noting comprehensive coverage of all entrances and the parking area. Someone was very concerned about monitoring everyone who visited the shelter. In the car, they reviewed what they had learned. The shelter was definitely involved in the parasitic experimentation. Rebecca Walsh was actively concealing information, and there were currently 6 dogs with symptoms similar to Duke's being held in a quarantine section. "We need to contact animal control authorities immediately," Dr. Carter decided. "Those 6 dogs are suffering the same way Duke suffered, and we can't allow that to continue." Marcus started the engine, but hesitated before pulling away from the shelter. "Doctor, I'm concerned about something. If Rebecca Walsh is part of this conspiracy, she's going to warn whoever she's working with that we're investigating. They might move those dogs or destroy evidence before authorities can intervene." Dr. Carter considered Marcus's warning. They had discovered clear evidence of animal abuse and illegal experimentation, but they were also dealing with people who had shown sophisticated planning and resources. The shelter's advanced security system suggested they were prepared for scrutiny. "We need to work quickly," Dr. Carter agreed. "Let's contact Dr. Morrison first. He needs to expedite his analysis of the parasitic specimens. Then we'll call animal control and request an immediate inspection of the shelter." As they drove away from the Millbrook Animal Shelter, Dr. Carter felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. 6 animals were suffering the same deliberate torture that Duke had endured, and she was the only person in a position to help them. The question was whether she could act quickly enough to prevent further harm. and whether the authorities would take her accusation seriously enough to intervene. The shelter intake records that Rebecca had refused to provide held the key to understanding the full scope of the conspiracy. Dr. Carter was determined to see those records, even if it meant returning with police officers and animal control officials who could compel their release. Back at the clinic, Dr. Carter and Marcus immediately began analyzing the security camera footage from their visit to the shelter. Marcus had discreetly recorded portions of their conversation with Rebecca Walsh using his phone, capturing her evasive responses and nervous behavior when confronted with evidence of the parasitic infections. "Doctor, look at this," Marcus said, playing back the recording. Notice how Rebecca's reaction changes the moment she sees the parasite photographs. She's not surprised, she's frightened. She knows exactly what those creatures are. Dr. Carter studied Rebecca's facial expressions frame by frame. The shelter director's initial shock quickly gave way to calculated defensiveness, suggesting she had been trained to handle inquiries about the research program. The conspiracy was more sophisticated than they had initially realized. A knock on the clinic door interrupted their analysis. Tom Bradley stood outside, a weathered man in his 60s, whose lined face suggested years of outdoor work. Dr. Carter recognized him as a frequent volunteer at the animal shelter, someone who had donated countless hours to caring for abandoned animals. "Dr. Carter, I heard you were asking questions about the shelter," Tom said, his voice carrying an urgency that immediately captured their attention. "I need to tell you things that Rebecca Walsh doesn't want anyone to know." Marcus invited Tom into the consultation room, sensing that they were about to receive crucial information about the conspiracy. Tom's hands trembled slightly as he sat down, the behavior of someone wrestling with a difficult decision. "I worked at the shelter for 3 years until last month," Tom began. "Rebecca fired me when I started asking too many questions about the special research program. I've been struggling with whether to come forward, but after hearing you were investigating, I knew I had to speak up." Dr. Carter leaned forward, encouraging Tom to continue. "What kind of special research program? What did you observe at the shelter?" Tom pulled a small notebook from his jacket pocket, its pages filled with handwritten observations and dates. Starting about 18 months ago, Rebecca began receiving shipments that she handled personally. Medical equipment, laboratory supplies, things that didn't make sense for a normal animal shelter. She set up a separate facility in the back building and restricted access to authorized personnel only. The notebook represented exactly the kind of documentation Dr. Carter needed detailed. Records of suspicious activities by someone with inside knowledge of the shelter's operations. Tom's position as a volunteer had given him access to information that would have been hidden from outside observers. "Tell us about the animals with limping conditions," Marcus requested. "Did you observe the development of their symptoms?" Tom nodded grimly. Healthy dogs would arrive at the shelter and be placed in normal kennels. After a week or two, Rebecca would select certain animals for special medical evaluation in the back building. When they returned to the general population, they would be limping and in obvious discomfort. Dr. Carter felt sick hearing confirmation of what she had suspected. The shelter was being used as a cover for selecting test subjects, healthy animals, who were deliberately infected with the engineered parasites as part of an ongoing research program. What happened to those animals? Dr. Carter asked, though she dreaded the answer. That's where things get really disturbing, Tom continued. The dogs with limping conditions were never actually adopted. Rebecca would tell the staff they had been placed with families, but I never saw any adopters come for them. Late at night, unmarked vans would arrive and take the animals away. Marcus exchanged a meaningful glance with Dr. Carter. The missing dogs hadn't been adopted. They had been transferred to another location, possibly for more intensive experimentation or disposal once their usefulness as test subjects had ended. Tom, opened his notebook to a specific page filled with license plate numbers and dates. I started documenting the van visits after I realized the adoptions weren't legitimate. Same vehicles, same time patterns, always between midnight and 3 in the morning when no one else was around. The license plate numbers provided concrete evidence that could be traced through motor vehicle records. For the first time since beginning their investigation, Dr. Carter felt they had actionable information that law enforcement could use to identify the people behind the conspiracy. Tom, did you ever see who operated these vans? Any identifying marks or company names? Dr. Carter asked. The drivers wore medical scrubs and handled the animals like laboratory specimens rather than pets, Tom replied. One vehicle had a partial logo, something about advanced biological, but I couldn't make out the complete name. Dr. Carter remembered the bulletin board notice at the shelter mentioning Advanced Biological Solutions as a research partner. The connection was becoming clearer. The shelter was serving as a front for a biomedical company conducting illegal animal experimentation. Marcus pulled up internet search results for Advanced Biological Solutions on his laptop. The company maintained a minimal web presence, listing only general research services and a post office box address. No staff directory, no detailed description of their work, no physical location. This is a shell company, Marcus observed. Legitimate. Research organizations maintain detailed websites with staff credentials and research publications. Advanced Biological Solutions is designed to hide information, not share it. Tom nodded in agreement. Rebecca was very secretive about her contact with them. She would take calls in her locked office and speak in whispers. When I asked about the research partnership, she told me it was confidential and above my clearance level. Dr. Carter began formulating a plan to expose the conspiracy. Tom's insider knowledge, combined with the physical evidence from Duke's surgery and the license plate documentation, provided a foundation for law enforcement intervention. Tom, are you willing to provide official testimony about what you observed? At the shelter? Dr. Carter asked. Your evidence could save the animals currently being held there. That's why I came to you, Tom replied firmly. Those animals deserve better than being used as laboratory equipment. If my testimony can stop this, then I'm prepared to face whatever consequences Rebecca and her partners might threaten. The three of them spent the next hour reviewing Tom's documentation and planning their approach to authorities. The notebook contained dates, times, and detailed descriptions of suspicious activities spanning 18 months, a comprehensive record of the shelter's involvement in illegal research. Marcus suggested contacting federal authorities rather than local police, given the sophistication of the conspiracy and the possibility that local law enforcement might be compromised. Doctor, if this company has the resources for genetic engineering and sophisticated surveillance, they might have connections in the local police department. Dr. Carter agreed with Marcus's assessment. The conspiracy had operated for at least 80 months without detection, suggesting either exceptional secrecy or cooperation from local authorities who should have been monitoring animal welfare. As Tom prepared to leave, he handed Dr. Carter a USB drive containing photographs he had secretly taken of the van deliveries and the restricted back building. I've been documenting everything since I became suspicious. These photos show the pattern of late-night transfers and the security measures Rebecca installed. With Tom's evidence added to their growing case file, Dr. Carter felt confident they could convince federal authorities to investigate the shelter and rescue the animals currently being held there. The question that remained was whether they could act quickly enough to prevent further harm to the 6 dogs in quarantine. The next morning brought an unexpected call from Dr. Morrison at the State Veterinary Laboratory. His voice carried an urgency that immediately captured Dr. Carter's attention as she prepared for another day of investigating the conspiracy. Lena, I've completed my analysis of those parasitic specimens, Dr. Morrison said. What you've discovered is far more serious than either of us initially realized. These organisms show clear evidence of genetic modification using advanced bioengineering techniques. Dr. Carter put the call on speaker so Marcus could hear the findings. They had been waiting for official confirmation of their suspicions about the artificial nature of the parasites. The specimens contain genetic markers that don't exist in natural parasitic species, Dr. Morrison continued. Someone has enhanced their feeding efficiency while programming them to avoid causing fatal damage to their hosts. This level of modification requires laboratory resources and expertise that would cost millions of dollars. Marcus leaned closer to the phone. Dr. Morrison, do you have any idea what the purpose of these modifications might be? Why would someone want to create controlled parasitic infections? There was a pause before Dr. Morrison answered. Based on the tissue analysis, these parasites appear designed to study pain response and neural adaptation. They're creating chronic, managed suffering while monitoring how the host nervous system adapts to ongoing discomfort. The implications made Dr. Carter feel physically ill. Duke and the other affected animals weren't just test subjects. They were being used to research pain tolerance and adaptation. Their suffering serving as data points in someone's scientific study. James, I need you to document everything you found and prepare a formal report, Dr. Carter said. We're planning to contact federal authorities, and your analysis will be crucial evidence. Lena, be very careful about who you trust with this information, Dr. Morrison warned. The level of sophistication in these specimens suggests involvement by people with significant resources and possibly government connections. This isn't just animal abuse. It's potentially connected to research with military or intelligence applications. After ending the call, Dr. Carter and Marcus began researching connections between pain research and military applications. What they discovered deepened their understanding of the conspiracy's scope and potential purpose. Marcus pulled up declassified documents about military research into enhanced interrogation techniques. Doctor, look at this. There's a long history of research into creating controllable, non-fatal pain for interrogation purposes. These parasites could be part of developing what they call humane torture methods. The realization that Duke's suffering might have been part of research into torture techniques added a new dimension to Dr. Carter's determination to expose the conspiracy. The implications extended far beyond animal welfare into human rights violations. Their research was interrupted by Tom Bradley's arrival at the clinic. His face showed the stress of someone who had made a dangerous decision to oppose powerful interests. Dr. Carter, I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, Tom said. There's something else you need to know about the research program at the shelter. Rebecca wasn't working alone. She had regular meetings with people from outside the community. Tom pulled out his notebook and turned to a section filled with vehicle descriptions and visitor observations. Every few weeks, expensive cars would arrive at the shelter after hours. The visitors wore business suits rather than medical attire, and they always carried briefcases. Dr. Carter studied Tom's detailed notes about the mysterious visitors. The pattern suggested oversight from people with significant authority and resources, individuals who wouldn't normally be involved in day-to-day animal shelter operations. Did you ever overhear any conversations or get a sense of what these meetings were about? Marcus asked. One time I was working late and heard part of a phone conversation Rebecca had after one of these meetings, Tom replied. She was talking about Phase 2 trials and human applications. She seemed concerned about timeline pressures and cost overruns. The reference to human applications confirmed Dr. Carter's worst fears. The parasitic research wasn't limited to animal testing. It was intended to be applied to human subjects, possibly as part of torture or interrogation programs. Tom opened his notebook to a page containing financial observations. I also noticed changes in the shelter's operations. That suggested significant outside funding. New equipment, facility improvements, salary increases for select staff, all happening despite declining public donations. Marcus began cross-referencing the visitor timeline with financial records that might be publicly available. Doctor, if we can establish a pattern of outside funding corresponding with the visitor schedule, we can build a case for systematic corruption of the shelter's mission. Dr. Carter decided they needed additional evidence before approaching federal authorities. Tom's observations were valuable, but they needed documentation that would stand up to legal scrutiny. Tom, I want you to help us gather more concrete evidence, Dr. Carter said. We need photographs of these visitors, documentation of the financial irregularities, and if possible, access to Rebecca's communications with Advanced Biological Solutions. Tom nodded grimly. Rebecca fired me, but I still have friends working at the shelter. Jenny, the volunteer who mentioned the quarantine dogs, has been asking questions about the research program. She might be willing to help. The plan that emerged from their discussion was risky, but necessary. Tom would coordinate with sympathetic shelter volunteers to document the next visitor meeting, while Dr. Carter and Marcus would research Advanced Biological Solutions more thoroughly. Marcus had been conducting deeper internet searches on the company and discovered concerning connections. Doctor, I found references to Advanced Biological Solutions in several military contractor databases. They're listed as a subcontractor for specialized biological research with the Department of Defense. The military connection explained the sophisticated surveillance equipment at the shelter and the substantial funding for the research program. They were dealing with a government-sponsored project that used civilian animal shelters as cover for developing enhanced interrogation techniques. Dr. Carter felt the weight of opposing not just private criminals, but potentially government-sanctioned research programs. The conspiracy had resources and authority that made exposure dangerous for everyone involved. We need to be extremely careful about how we proceed, Dr. Carter told Tom and Marcus. If this research has government backing, the people involved will have significant power to protect their interests. Tom's response reflected the moral clarity that had driven him to risk his safety by coming forward. Doctor, those animals are suffering because someone decided their pain was useful for research. I don't care how powerful these people are. What they're doing is wrong. As Tom left to coordinate with his contacts at the shelter, Dr. Carter and Marcus prepared for what they knew would be the most dangerous phase of their investigation. They were no longer just dealing with animal abuse. They were exposing potential government corruption and illegal human experimentation research. The laboratory equipment invoices that Tom had mentioned would be their next target. Financial documentation would provide traceable evidence of the conspiracy's scope and funding sources. Information that couldn't be dismissed or covered up as easily as witness testimony. 2 days later, Tom Bradley contacted Dr. Carter with information that would expose the full scope of the conspiracy. His voice was tense as he explained that Jenny had agreed to help gather evidence, but their window of opportunity was closing rapidly. Dr. Carter, Jenny overheard Rebecca making plans to transfer the quarantine dogs tomorrow night, Tom said urgently. If we're going to document what's happening in that back building, it has to be tonight. Dr. Carter felt the pressure of time running out for the 6 animals suffering in the shelter's quarantine facility. Duke's recovery had proven that the parasites could be removed, but only if they acted before the dogs were transferred to whatever final destination awaited them. Marcus volunteered to accompany Dr. Carter on the nighttime reconnaissance. Despite the obvious dangers of confronting people who had already shown willingness to conduct illegal experiments on innocent animals, we'll need to be extremely careful, Dr. Carter told Marcus as they prepared surveillance equipment. If Tom is right about government connections, we could be dealing with people who have significant resources to protect their operations. At midnight, They met Tom and Jenny in a parking lot near the animal shelter. Jenny was a young woman in her early 20s whose love for animals had motivated her to volunteer despite the demanding schedule. Her willingness to risk her safety to help the quarantined dogs demonstrated the courage that Dr. Carter had learned to recognize in people who truly cared about animal welfare. "Rebecca leaves around 10 o'clock, Jenny explained nervously. "But she has motion sensors and security cameras covering all the main entrances. There's a service door in the back that might not be monitored as closely." Tom had brought bolt cutters and a flashlight, prepared to gain access to the restricted area where the quarantine dogs were being held. His determination to expose the conspiracy had grown stronger since his firing, particularly after learning about the planned transfer. They approached the shelter cautiously, staying in shadows and avoiding the obvious camera positions that Tom had mapped during his months of observation. The building seemed different at night, more ominous, its cheerful daytime facade replaced by the cold efficiency of a research facility. The service door that Jenny had identified was secured with a standard padlock that Tom's bolt cutters handled easily. As they entered the back building, the sounds of whimpering dogs immediately confirmed that animals were being held in the restricted area. Dr. Carter's flashlight revealed a facility that bore no resemblance to a normal animal shelter. The quarantine section contained 6 kennels, equipped with monitoring equipment that recorded the animal's vital signs and behavior patterns. Each kennel held a dog showing the familiar symptoms of parasitic infection, limping, weight loss, and obvious discomfort. "This is a laboratory," Marcus whispered, documenting the sophisticated equipment with his camera. "Look at these monitoring systems. They're recording everything about these animals' pain responses." The dog's conditions broke Dr. Carter's heart. Each animal showed advanced stages of parasitic infection, their suffering deliberately prolonged. To gather research data, she recognized the same organized pattern of tissue damage that she had found in Duke's leg, but these cases were more severe, suggesting longer exposure to the engineered parasites. Jenny discovered a filing cabinet containing research notes that made the conspiracy's purpose horrifyingly clear. Dr. Lena Vasquez's handwritten documentation detailed experiments designed to measure pain tolerance, neural adaptation, and psychological responses to chronic suffering. "Doctor, you need to see this," Jenny said, her voice shaking as she read from the research files. "They're planning to move to human trials next month. The animal testing was just preparation for applying these techniques to people." Dr. Carter photographed every page of Dr. Vasquez's notes, documenting research that violated every principle of ethical science and animal welfare. The files revealed a systematic program of torture disguised as medical research, with the ultimate goal of developing enhanced interrogation techniques. The research notes contained detailed observations about each test subject's response to prolonged parasitic infection. Dr. Vasquez had carefully documented how the animal's behavior changed over time, noting which individuals showed the greatest capacity for enduring controlled suffering. Marcus found computer equipment that was downloading data from the monitoring systems attached to each kennel. The digital records showed weeks of continuous observation, with graphs tracking pain indicators, stress hormones, and behavioral modifications in real time. "They're treating these animals like laboratory equipment," Marcus said angrily. "Every aspect of their suffering is being measured and recorded for future applications." Tom discovered shipping labels for the planned transfer, revealing that the dogs were scheduled to be moved to a facility in an industrial area outside the city. The destination address corresponded to a warehouse registered to Advanced Biological Solutions, the same company that had been funding the shelter's research program. As they documented the evidence, Dr. Carter realized they had uncovered something far more serious than isolated animal abuse. The research program represented a systematic effort to develop torture techniques using scientific methods. with innocent animals serving as test subjects for future human applications. The sound of a vehicle in the parking lot interrupted their investigation. Tom immediately recognized the engine sound as one of the unmarked vans that had been making regular pickups at the shelter. "We need to leave immediately," Tom whispered urgently. "If they find us here, we'll disappear just like those adopted dogs." They quickly gathered the most critical documentation: Dr. Vasquez's research notes, the computer data, and photographs of the quarantine facility, before escaping through the service door. The approaching vehicle represented immediate danger, but it also confirmed that the transfer was happening ahead of schedule, back in the safety of Dr. Carter's clinic. They reviewed the evidence they had gathered. Dr. Vasquez's research notes provided detailed documentation of illegal experimentation, while the computer data showed the systematic nature of the animal torture program. "We have enough evidence to shut down this operation," Dr. Carter decided. "But we need to contact federal authorities immediately. Those 6 dogs are going to be transferred tonight, and we might not be able to trace them to the new location." Marcus began preparing a comprehensive evidence package that included Dr. Morrison's analysis of the parasitic specimens, Tom's observational records, and the documentation they had gathered from the quarantine facility. The research notes revealed that Dr. Elena Vasquez had been dismissed from previous positions for ethical violations involving human experimentation. Her work at the animal shelter represented a continuation of research that legitimate institutions had refused to support. "This woman has been conducting torture research for years," Dr. Carter realized. The shelter gave her access to test subjects without oversight or accountability. Jenny's courage in helping expose the conspiracy had provided the final pieces of evidence needed to prove systematic animal abuse and illegal research. Her inside knowledge of the shelter's operations had made their investigation possible. As dawn approached, Dr. Carter prepared to contact federal authorities with evidence that would expose a conspiracy reaching from a local animal shelter to government-sponsored torture research. The 6 dogs in quarantine represented immediate victims who needed rescue, while the research program itself threatened future human subjects. The laboratory equipment and research notes they had photographed would serve as irrefutable evidence of the conspiracy's scope and purpose. Dr. Vasquez's documentation had provided the proof needed to demonstrate that the parasitic infections were deliberate and systematic rather than isolated incidents of animal abuse. The call to the FBI's regional office should have been the turning point in their investigation. Dr. Carter had prepared a comprehensive briefing about the conspiracy, complete with Dr. Morrison's analysis, photographic evidence, and Dr. Vasquez's research documentation. She expected immediate action to rescue the animals and arrest the people responsible for the illegal experimentation. Instead, she found herself speaking with Agent Robert Hayes, whose response revealed a disturbing truth about the conspiracy's reach into federal law enforcement. "Dr. Carter, I appreciate your concern about animal welfare," Agent Hayes said dismissively. "However, the activities you're describing may be part of a classified research program that's beyond your security clearance. I'm going to recommend that you discontinue your investigation and focus on your veterinary practice." The agent's familiarity with the research program and his immediate move to shut down investigation told Dr. Carter everything she needed to know. The conspiracy wasn't just protected by local corruption. It had support within the federal agencies that should have been investigating it. "Agent Hayes, are you telling me that torturing animals with engineered parasites is a legitimate government program?" Dr. Carter asked, her voice rising with indignation. "Because that's what's happening at the Millbrook Animal Shelter. I'm telling you that some research activities are classified for national security reasons," Agent Hayes replied coldly. "Your interference with these activities could result in serious legal consequences for you and your associates." After ending the call, Dr. Carter sat in stunned silence. The FBI agents' response had transformed their investigation from a pursuit of justice into a confrontation with government-sanctioned torture research. The conspiracy they had uncovered wasn't rogue criminal activity. It was an official program. With federal protection, Marcus had been monitoring local law enforcement communications using a police scanner, and his findings confirmed their worst fears about the extent of corruption. Sheriff Matthews has been in regular contact with the animal shelter. He's coordinating security for what he calls federal research activities. The realization that local law enforcement was complicit in the conspiracy explained how the research program had operated for 18 months without detection. Sheriff Matthews had been protecting the illegal activities rather than investigating them. Tom Bradley arrived at the clinic with information that deepened their understanding of the conspiracy's local connections. His network of contacts had revealed that several prominent community leaders were investors in advanced biological solutions. Dr. Carter, this conspiracy reaches into the City Council, the Chamber of Commerce, and the hospital board, Tom reported grimly. At least 6 community leaders have financial stakes in the research program. The investor list included Mayor Patricia Hendricks, Dr. William Foster from the regional hospital, and businessman Charles Roth, who owned several properties that advanced biological solutions used for their operations. The conspiracy had corrupted the very institutions that citizens trusted to protect them. Jenny called with urgent news about the quarantine dogs. Dr. Carter, they moved the animals 2 hours ago. Rebecca was coordinating with people in military uniforms. This wasn't a normal transfer. The involvement of military personnel confirmed Dr. Morrison's analysis about the research program's connection to enhanced interrogation technique development. The animals weren't being transferred to another research facility. They were being delivered to military personnel for applications that Dr. Carter didn't want to imagine. As they processed the devastating news about federal corruption and local conspiracy, an unexpected visitor arrived at the clinic. Agent Sarah Chen identified herself as a federal investigator, but her approach was completely different from Agent Hayes' dismissive hostility. Dr. Carter, I've been tracking the Advanced Biological Solutions program for 8 months, Agent Chen said. Your investigation has provided crucial evidence for a parallel inquiry into illegal human experimentation research. Agent Chen's encrypted communication device revealed the full scope of the conspiracy they had uncovered. The Millbrook Animal Shelter was one of 12 facilities across the country conducting similar research, all funded through classified military contracts and protected by corrupted local authorities. The program you've exposed is part of a larger effort to develop torture techniques that can't be traced or proven, Agent Chen explained. They're using animal testing to perfect methods that will be applied to human subjects in situations where conventional interrogation is legally prohibited. The revelation that their local investigation had uncovered a national conspiracy added new urgency to their mission. Dr. Carter and her team weren't just fighting to save animals in their community. They were exposing a program that threatened human rights on a national scale. Agent Chen showed them classified documents that revealed the true purpose of the parasitic research. The engineered organisms were designed to cause undetectable suffering that could be applied to prisoners or detainees without leaving evidence of torture. These parasites can be introduced through routine medical procedures, Agent Chen continued. The victim experiences chronic pain that appears to be a natural medical condition, providing perfect cover for interrogators who want to break someone's will without obvious abuse. Dr. Carter felt sick realizing that Duke's infection had been a test run for techniques intended for human victims. The precision and sophistication of the parasitic organisms made sense in the context of developing untraceable torture methods. Tom's discovery of the encrypted communication device in Rebecca Walsh's office had provided Agent Chen with access to the conspiracy's internal communications. The device contained evidence of coordination between advanced biological solutions and similar programs in other states. Your investigation broke open a conspiracy that my agency has been trying to penetrate for months, Agent Chun told them. The evidence you gathered from the shelter's quarantine facility provided the proof we needed to document systematic animal abuse as preparation for human applications. The encrypted communications revealed that Dr. Elena Vasquez had been specifically recruited for the program because of her willingness to conduct experiments that ethical researchers would refuse. Her dismissal from previous positions hadn't been a liability. It had been a qualification. Marcus asked the question that had been haunting Dr. Carter since Agent Hayes' phone call. How do we expose a conspiracy that has federal protection? If the FBI is covering for these people, who can we trust to stop them? Agent Chun's answer provided hope for the first time since they had discovered the federal corruption. There are people within the government who oppose these programs. Dr. Carter, my investigation represents official resistance to the torture research, even though it's being conducted in secret. The revelation that their investigation had connected with legitimate federal oversight provided a path forward that didn't involve confronting the entire government system. Agent Chun represented lawful authority that could act on the evidence they had gathered. What we need now is coordinated public exposure, Agent Chun explained. The conspiracy depends on secrecy, but if we can document everything simultaneously and release it through multiple channels, they won't be able to contain the story. Dr. Carter agreed to coordinate with Agent Chan's investigation, understanding that their local efforts had become part of a larger battle against government-sanctioned torture research. The 6 dogs from the quarantine facility were gone, but their documentation could prevent future victims, both animal and human. The encrypted communication device would serve as the key evidence, proving coordination between local conspirators and federal research programs. Agent Chun's access to the conspiracy's internal communications provided the documentation needed to expose the full scope of the illegal activities. Agent Chun's plan for exposing the conspiracy required precise coordination across multiple fronts. The media evidence package she helped Dr. Carter prepare would simultaneously reveal the local animal abuse and the national torture research program, making it impossible for federal authorities to contain the story. We have one opportunity to get this right, Agent Chun explained as they worked through the night preparing documentation. Once we release this information, the conspirators will have massive resources to discredit us and destroy remaining evidence. Dr. Carter felt the weight of responsibility as she organized the comprehensive evidence package. Duke's medical records and the extracted parasites served as the foundation, while Dr. Vasquez's research notes provided proof of the systematic torture program. Tom's observations and Jenny's inside information documented the shelter's role in the conspiracy. Marcus had compiled digital evidence from their nighttime infiltration of the quarantine facility, including photographs of the monitoring equipment and video recordings of the suffering animals. The documentation painted a clear picture of scientific torture disguised as legitimate research. Doctor, I've been thinking about the best way to ensure this story reaches the public, Marcus said. We need to contact multiple news organizations. Simultaneously, local television, national networks, and investigative journalists who specialize in government corruption. Agent Chun agreed with Marcus's assessment. The conspiracy has connections in law enforcement and possibly in media organizations. We need to overwhelm their ability to suppress the story by releasing it through channels they can't all control. The evidence package included Dr. Morrison's laboratory analysis proving the artificial nature of the parasites, financial records showing government funding for the research, and the encrypted communications documenting coordination between local and federal conspirators. Tom Bradley had prepared a detailed timeline of suspicious activities at the animal shelter, while Jenny provided documentation of Rebecca Walsh's coordination with advanced biological solutions. Their combined testimony would establish the pattern of systematic animal abuse. As they finalized the evidence package, Dr. Carter made a decision that would put her directly in conflict with powerful government interests. She was going to perform surgery on Duke again, this time with media present to document the removal of any remaining parasites and prove the reality of the conspiracy. "We need irrefutable visual evidence that will resonate with the public," Dr. Carter explained. "People need to see what was done to Duke, and they need to understand that this could be applied to human victims." The live surgery would serve multiple purposes, demonstrating the reality of the parasitic infections, showing Duke's recovery as proof that other victims could be helped, and providing compelling visual evidence that media organizations couldn't ignore. Agent Chun coordinated with sympathetic journalists who had been investigating government torture programs. Sarah Walsh from the regional television station and Michael Torres, an investigative reporter for a national news magazine, agreed to attend the surgery and receive exclusive access to the evidence package. Marcus arranged the surgical suite to accommodate media equipment while maintaining sterile conditions for Duke's procedure. The Henderson family had agreed to participate, understanding that their beloved companion's suffering could help expose a conspiracy that threatened other animals and potentially human victims. Tom coordinated with his remaining contacts at the animal shelter to monitor for any signs that the conspirators were preparing to destroy evidence or flee. Rebecca Walsh had been increasingly agitated since the quarantine dog's transfer, suggesting she knew the conspiracy was at risk of exposure. Jenny risked her safety by agreeing to secretly record conversations at the shelter, potentially capturing admissions of guilt or evidence of the conspiracy's scope. Her courage in continuing to gather evidence while surrounded by people who had shown willingness to harm animals demonstrated remarkable dedication to justice. The preparation revealed just how extensive the conspiracy had become. Agent Chun's investigation had identified similar programs in 11 other states, all following the same pattern of using animal shelters as cover for torture research development. "Dr. Carter, you need to understand that exposing this program will make you a target," Agent Chun warned. "These people have significant resources and no ethical constraints about protecting their interests." Dr. Carter had already received anonymous threats warning her to discontinue her investigation. The messages had been professionally written and delivered through channels that suggested government resources, confirming that the conspirators were monitoring her activities. Despite the dangers, Dr. Carter felt compelled to act. Duke's recovery had proven that the parasites could be removed and their victims healed. The 6 dogs from the quarantine facility were gone, but public exposure could prevent future animals from suffering similar fates. Marcus had researched protection protocols for whistleblowers facing government retaliation. "Doctor, once we release this information, we need to be prepared for legal challenges, media attacks, and possible physical threats. The conspirators will use every available method to discredit our evidence." The Henderson family's involvement in the live surgery required careful consideration of their safety. Tom Henderson had received similar threats after asking questions about Duke's treatment, while Linda Henderson had noticed surveillance vehicles near their home since Dr. Carter's investigation began. Emma Henderson's emotional support for Duke during his recovery had captured the public's attention through social media posts about his mysterious illness and treatment. Her genuine love for Duke and her family's transparency about his condition would provide powerful testimony for the media documentation. Agent Chun arranged for security during the live surgery, coordinating with federal marshals who were part of the legitimate oversight of torture research programs. The protection would ensure that the procedure could be completed and documented without interference from corrupted local authorities. The timing of the evidence release required coordination with legal authorities who could act on the documentation. Agent Chun had prepared arrest warrants for Rebecca Walsh, Dr. Elena Vasquez, and several other key conspirators. Time to prevent them from fleeing once the story became public. The arrests need to happen simultaneously with the media release, Agent Chun explained. If we give them any warning, they'll destroy evidence and disappear into whatever protection network they have established. Dr. Carter reviewed the surgical plan one final time, ensuring that the procedure would safely remove any remaining parasites, while providing clear visual evidence of the conspiracy. Duke's improvement since the initial surgery had been remarkable, but microscopic examinations suggested that some organisms might still be present. The live surgery would also demonstrate the skill and precision required to remove the engineered parasites, potentially providing information that could help other veterinarians treat similar cases if the conspiracy had affected animals in other locations. Marcus had prepared backup recording equipment to ensure that the surgery would be documented even if the primary media equipment failed. The procedure needed to be preserved as evidence for legal proceedings and as proof for public consumption. As the final preparations were completed, Dr. Carter reflected on how her quiet veterinary practice had become the center of a national conspiracy investigation. Duke's routine examination had uncovered a torture research program that threatened the basic principles of medical ethics and animal welfare. Tom Bradley's decision to come forward with his observations had made the investigation possible, while Jenny's courage in gathering inside information had provided crucial evidence. Agent Chun's coordination represented the federal government's legitimate response to illegal torture research. The media evidence package represented months of careful investigation, documented proof of systematic animal abuse, and evidence of a conspiracy that reached from a local animal shelter to classified military research programs. Tomorrow's events would determine whether justice could prevail against government-protected torture research. Dr. Carter prepared Duke for the surgery that would expose a conspiracy and potentially save countless future victims, both animal and human. The parasitic specimens they had preserved would serve as evidence in legal proceedings, while the live documentation would provide irrefutable proof for public consumption. The morning would bring the climactic confrontation between Dr. Carter's pursuit of justice and a conspiracy that had corrupted local institutions and infiltrated federal law enforcement. Duke's surgery would serve as the focal point for exposing systematic torture research disguised as legitimate medical science. The morning of Duke's surgery arrived with the weight of months of investigation culminating in a single procedure that would expose a national conspiracy. Dr. Carter arrived at the clinic before dawn, reviewing her surgical plan while Agent Chun coordinated the simultaneous arrests and media releases that would prevent the conspirators from escaping justice. Sarah Walsh from Channel 7 News set up cameras in the surgical suite, her equipment positioned to capture the procedure without interfering with Duke's care. Michael Torres prepared his recording equipment for the investigative report that would expose the conspiracy to national audiences. Dr. Carter, we're ready to begin broadcasting live coverage of Duke's surgery, Sarah announced. Viewers across the region will see the evidence of this conspiracy as you remove the remaining parasites. The Henderson family waited in the consultation room, their faces showing the complex emotions of people whose beloved companion had become the center of a national scandal. Tom Henderson's anger about Duke's deliberate infection had grown into determination to see justice served, while Linda Henderson focused on Duke's recovery and their family's role in exposing the truth. Emma Henderson held Duke's head gently as Dr. Carter prepared the anesthesia. Despite everything her family had endured, the teenager's primary concern remained Duke's well-being and the hope that his suffering could prevent similar harm to other animals. Agent Chun received confirmation that federal marshals were moving simultaneously on multiple targets. Dr. Carter, the arrests are beginning now. Rebecca Walsh and Dr. Elena Vasquez are being taken into custody as we speak. The live surgery documentation began as Dr. Carter made the first incision, her surgical expertise providing steady hands despite the unprecedented circumstances. The television cameras captured every detail as she carefully examined Duke's leg tissue for any remaining parasitic organisms. Here we can see evidence of the organized damage pattern that these artificial parasites created, Dr. Carter explained. For the cameras, her voice maintained professional calm while documenting the conspiracy's impact on an innocent animal. Marcus assisted with the procedure while monitoring news reports on his phone. The simultaneous arrests were proceeding according to Agent Chun's plan, with conspirators being taken into custody before they could destroy evidence or coordinate their defense. The surgical exploration revealed 2 additional parasitic larvae that had avoided detection during the initial procedure. Dr. Carter carefully extracted the organisms while the cameras documented their size, organization, and artificial characteristics that proved genetic modification. These parasites show clear evidence of bioengineering. Dr. Carter continued her narration. They were designed to cause controlled suffering while avoiding fatal damage to their host. A perfect tool for torture research disguised as medical science. News of the arrests began reaching television audiences as Dr. Carter completed the parasite removal. Rebecca Walsh had been found with documents detailing plans to expand the research program to human subjects, while Dr. Elena Vasquez was arrested at a facility where additional animals were being held for experimentation. The live broadcast was generating immediate public outrage as viewers realized the scope of the conspiracy and the systematic nature of the animal abuse. Social media responses show people demanding investigation of animal shelters in their own communities. Sheriff Matthews was arrested while attempting to destroy evidence at the animal shelter, his corruption exposed through the encrypted communications that Agent Chun had accessed. The sheriff's involvement explained how the conspiracy had operated without law enforcement interference. Marcus announced updates from other locations as federal agents raided advanced biological solutions facilities across the country. They're finding similar research programs in 8 other states. This conspiracy was much larger than we realized. Dr. Carter completed Duke's surgery with the careful precision that had made her reputation. But this procedure carried implications far beyond veterinary medicine. The live documentation had provided irrefutable evidence of the conspiracy while demonstrating that victims could be healed and justice could be served. Duke's recovery proves that these artificial parasites can be removed and their victims can be saved, Dr. Carter told the television audience. But we must ensure that no other animals are forced to endure this kind of systematic torture. Agent Chun coordinated the evidence release to multiple news organizations, ensuring that the conspiracy's exposure couldn't be contained by any single media outlet. The comprehensive documentation was reaching television networks, newspapers, and online platforms simultaneously. As Duke began recovering from anesthesia, his vital signs remained strong, and his response suggested that the final parasites had been successfully removed. The Henderson family's relief was evident as they saw their beloved companion showing immediate improvement. The live surgery had achieved its intended purpose, providing compelling visual evidence that resonated with public audiences while demonstrating the reality of the conspiracy. The combination of Duke's obvious suffering and his remarkable recovery created a powerful narrative of abuse and justice. Federal authorities confirmed that the raids had prevented the transfer of additional animals to military facilities, saving dozens of dogs and cats that were scheduled for parasitic infection as part of the expanded research program. Michael Torres prepared his investigative report for national distribution, incorporating the surgical footage with the documentary evidence that Dr. Carter's investigation had gathered. The comprehensive expose would reach audiences across the country and internationally. Dr. Elena Vasquez's arrest at the Advanced Biological Solutions facility provided the final piece of evidence needed to expose the full scope of the conspiracy. Federal agents found her destroying research files when they arrived, but Agent Chun's team had already secured backup documentation through their infiltration of the encrypted communication network. Dr. Vasquez has agreed to provide testimony in exchange for reduced federal charges. Agent Chun announced to Dr. Carter as Duke completed his recovery from surgery. Her confession is revealing details about the conspiracy that we never could have discovered independently. The confession video that Dr. Vasquez recorded in federal custody exposed a torture research program that extended far beyond the Millbrook Animal Shelter. Her testimony revealed coordination with military contractors, government officials, and research institutions across 12 states, all working to develop untraceable methods of causing human suffering. The animal testing was preparation for human applications, Dr. Vasquez admitted in her recorded statement. We were perfecting techniques that could be used on prisoners and detainees, without leaving evidence of torture or violating international law technically. Marcus monitored news coverage as the story spread across national media outlets. The combination of Duke's live surgery, the simultaneous arrests, and Dr. Vasquez's confession created a comprehensive narrative that captured public attention and demanded government accountability. The confession revealed that the Henderson family had been specifically targeted because Duke represented an ideal test subject, a healthy animal with devoted owners who would seek extensive veterinary care, providing multiple opportunities to monitor the parasites, effects, and the victim's response to treatment. Tom Henderson's reaction to learning that his family had been deliberately chosen for the experiment reflected the personal violation that many Americans felt upon discovering the conspiracy. They used our love for Duke against us, turning every veterinary visit into data collection for their torture research. Dr. Vasquez's testimony also revealed the scope of planned human trials that Dr. Carter's investigation had prevented. Military facilities in 3 states were prepared to begin testing the refined parasites on prisoners and political detainees, with the infection delivered through routine medical procedures. We were weeks away from the first human applications, Dr. Vasquez confessed. The animal testing had proven that we could create undetectable, controllable suffering that would appear to be natural medical conditions. Agent Chun coordinated with international human rights organizations to document the conspiracy's implications for torture prevention and medical ethics. The artificial parasites represented a new category of torture, technology that required immediate international attention and regulation. The arrests continued throughout the day as federal authorities followed the evidence trail that Dr. Carter's investigation had established. Mayor Patricia Hendricks was taken into custody for her financial involvement in the conspiracy, while Dr. William Foster faced charges for using his medical position to facilitate the research program. Marcus received updates on the rescued animals as federal agents raided facilities across the country. They found over 60 animals being used for similar experiments. All of them are being transferred to legitimate veterinary facilities for treatment and recovery. The national scope of the rescued animals validated Dr. Carter's decision to risk her safety by investigating Duke's condition. Her veterinary expertise and ethical courage had exposed a conspiracy that was causing systematic torture across multiple states. Jenny's documentation of the shelter's operations provided crucial evidence for prosecuting the local conspirators. Her courage in continuing to gather information while surrounded by dangerous people had made the investigation's success possible. The confession video revealed that Rebecca Walsh had been recruited specifically because of her willingness to exploit her position of trust to harm animals. The shelter director's corruption had violated the fundamental mission of animal welfare. Organizations. Dr. Vasquez's testimony exposed the financial structure that had funded the conspiracy, revealing government contracts worth millions of dollars. for developing enhanced interrogation technologies that could avoid legal classification as torture. Tom Bradley's documentation of the conspiracy's local operations provided evidence that secured convictions for all major participants. His decision to come forward, despite personal risk, had broken open a national torture research program. The confession confirmed that Sheriff Matthews had received substantial payments for protecting the research operations and intimidating anyone who asked questions. His corruption had extended beyond the animal experiments to include covering up other illegal activities by the conspirators. As Duke's recovery continued, the Henderson family found themselves at the center of a national conversation about government accountability and animal rights. Their transparency about Duke's ordeal had provided the emotional connection that made the abstract concept of torture research personally meaningful to Osawa. Millions of Americans. Agent Chun's coordination of the evidence release had successfully prevented the conspiracy from containing the story or escaping accountability. The simultaneous exposure through multiple channels had overwhelmed the conspirators' ability to suppress the investigation. Dr. Vasquez's confession also revealed that the conspiracy had been monitoring Dr. Carter's investigation from its early stages, but had underestimated her determination and ethical commitment to protecting innocent animals from systematic abuse. The comprehensive nature of the confession provided prosecutors with evidence needed to secure convictions and dismantle the entire research network. Dr. Vasquez's detailed testimony would ensure that justice was served for both the animal victims and the human subjects who had been targeted for future experimentation. 3 months after the conspiracy's exposure, Dr. Carter stood in her clinic's examination room holding a document that represented far more than medical records. Duke's clean bill of health, signed by Dr. Morrison at the State Veterinary Laboratory, confirmed what everyone could see with their own eyes. The golden retriever had made a complete recovery from his ordeal. The morning sun streamed through the windows as the Henderson family arrived for Duke's final follow-up appointment. The transformation in both the dog and his family was remarkable. Duke bounded through the clinic doors with the enthusiasm of a puppy, his golden coat lustrous and his gait completely normal. The limp that had defined 3 years of his life was nothing more than a painful memory. "Dr. Carter, look at him." Emma Henderson laughed as Duke playfully tugged at his leash. Now a high school senior, Emma had channeled her experience into advocacy work, speaking at schools about the importance of questioning authority when innocent lives are threatened. Her college applications included essays about how her family's ordeal had shaped her commitment to justice and animal welfare. Tom Henderson's weathered hands gently scratched Duke's ears, his eyes bright with the particular joy that comes from watching a loved one recover from long suffering. "Some mornings I still can't believe he's really okay. For 3 years, we watched him struggle, never knowing that someone was deliberately causing his pain." Linda Henderson had become an advocate for transparency in animal welfare organizations, serving on oversight committees that monitored shelters for signs of research abuse. Her experience as an educator had prepared her to recognize the importance of institutional accountability in protecting vulnerable populations. Dr. Carter completed Duke's examination with the thoroughness that had built her reputation over 30 years of practice. Every measurement, every palpation, every observation confirmed the complete absence of the artificial parasites that had tormented him for so long. "Duke's recovery has exceeded every expectation," Dr. Carter announced to the family. "His muscle tone has returned to normal, his weight is perfect, and there's no evidence of any lasting damage from the parasites. He's a completely healthy 8-year-old golden retriever." Marcus entered the examination room carrying updates from Agent Chun about the ongoing prosecutions and the broader impact of their investigation. His promotion to associate veterinarian reflected both his crucial role in exposing the conspiracy and his growing expertise in identifying research abuse. "Doctor, Agent Chun wanted you to know that the federal investigation has now documented prevention of similar experiments at 68 facilities across the country. Marcus reported, "Our work here saved hundreds of animals from systematic torture. The scope of prevented suffering validated every risk they had taken in pursuing the conspiracy." Dr. Carter's decision to investigate Duke's unusual condition had disrupted a national research program that represented a fundamental corruption of medical science and animal welfare. Agent Chun arrived as they were completing Duke's examination, her presence a reminder of how their local investigation had connected with federal efforts to combat government-sponsored torture research. Her partnership with Dr. Carter had proven that legitimate law enforcement could prevail against institutional corruption. "Dr. Carter, I wanted to deliver this news personally," Agent Chun said, holding an official document. "The President has signed legislation inspired by Duke's case that requires complete transparency in all government-funded animal research. The Duke Protection Act establishes independent oversight and public reporting for any research involving pain or distress. The legislation represented a fundamental change in how the government approached animal research, with new protections that would prevent future conspiracies from operating in secrecy. Duke's suffering had been transformed into a shield protecting countless future victims. Tom Bradley joined them for the celebration, his notebook still filled with observations, but now focused on monitoring the reformed Millbrook Animal Shelter. His courage in coming forward had provided the insider knowledge that made exposing the conspiracy possible. "The new shelter management has implemented every transparency measure we recommended," Tom reported. "Public access to all records, community oversight of operations, and mandatory reporting of any research partnerships. It's become a model for ethical animal welfare." Jenny had been promoted to assistant manager at the restructured shelter, her courage in gathering evidence earning recognition and trust from the community. Her dedication to animal welfare had found its proper outlet in legitimate advocacy rather than dangerous undercover work. The prosecutions had concluded with justice served across all levels of the conspiracy. Dr. Elena Vasquez received a 20-year federal sentence for her role in developing torture techniques, while Rebecca Walsh was sentenced to 15 years for coordinating the animal abuse. Sheriff Matthews faced 12 years for corruption and witness intimidation. Advanced Biological Solutions had been completely dismantled, its assets forfeited and distributed as restitution to affected families and animal welfare organizations. The company's sophisticated facade had been revealed as a cover for systematic cruelty disguised as legitimate research. Dr. Carter reflected on how profoundly the investigation had changed her understanding of the responsibilities that came with veterinary expertise. Her clinical skills had saved Duke, but her ethical courage had saved countless other victims from similar fates. The international response to the exposed conspiracy had led to new treaties governing research involving deliberate pain infliction and stricter oversight of military biomedical contracts. The artificial parasites had become symbols of science corrupted for torture purposes. As the Henderson family prepared to leave with Duke, Dr. Carter felt the deep satisfaction that comes from seeing justice served and healing achieved. Duke's recovery proved that even the most sophisticated cruelty could be overcome through knowledge, courage, and unwavering commitment to protecting innocent lives. The veterinary community had embraced Dr. Carter's example, establishing new protocols for identifying suspicious research activities and reporting unusual cases that might indicate systematic abuse. Veterinary schools now taught her case as an example of professional ethics in practice. Marcus brought news of their next case, a German Shepherd with unusual behavioral symptoms that required careful investigation. Dr. Carter approached each new patient with the vigilance that came from understanding how evil could hide behind legitimate institutions, but also with confidence that truth could prevail against even sophisticated Conspiracies. Duke's clean bill of health would remain in Dr. Carter's office as a daily reminder that individual courage could triumph over institutional corruption. The document represented more than one dog's recovery. It symbolized the healing of a community's trust and the victory of justice over systematic cruelty. The afternoon found Dr. Carter in her clinic's garden, watching Duke play with boundless energy while his family laughed at his antics. His recovery had transformed their trauma into triumph, proving that love and determination could overcome even deliberate evil. The setting sun cast golden light across the garden as Dr. Carter reflected on the journey that had begun with a routine examination and evolved into a defense of fundamental principles separating healing from harm. Duke's story would continue inspiring others to act when they witness systematic abuse, demonstrating that ordinary people possess extraordinary power to change the world for the better.